can share about how you can access already existing material. Yes, that's the pen of Kenya. I have the privilege to meet very many Kenyans around the world. They just bear testimony to what I've always said. There are very, very many brilliant Kenyans. Our society does not appreciate them and does not unlock their capacities. Last Saturday I was telling people I grew up next to a rural slum where we have a primary school with 2,500 pupils. And half of the pupils were always away from school in May because they joined their mothers to go and weed for other people to be given food for the family. And still they were competitive. And I just imagine if those kids were in class every school day, maybe we'll be having astronauts out of the society. For every success story in our society, we have at least 10 who have been left kwa mataa because opportunity was not unlocked for them. But it's also true that for a country to grow, the difference between Rwanda and Kenya on ICT, and I've shared this in a very repeated commentary from when I took Jack Ma to Kenya and I took him to Rwanda, is follow-up. One thing is say this is good na tutaifanya. Another thing is follow through with action. I brought Jack Ma to Nairobi. We discussed about the building of the electronic global trading platform. After Nairobi, I took him to Kigali. Rwanda is the only country in Africa which has opened electronic trading platform, which has more than doubled its exports of coffee and taken up the value of Rwandese coffee by 40%. So I have an idea about what we have not been doing, and I believe I know what it takes to get those things to be done. And to me, that is part of the national revival that I want to promise Kenyans. And I want others to commit that this is what we want for our country. The question of public kitchens. You know, most developed countries, when COVID came, I live in Switzerland. I've lived in Switzerland for the last 7.5 years. Every person who had a business, the government had tax returns which showed how much money you are making. So the government gave you 60% of the money you are making from your business until COVID goes away. So you don't dismiss your staff. You have paid for staff given by the state. And also that's the public kitchens in the US and the subsidy that Biden is now giving, the $1,400 per family. The countries that can afford it are doing the necessary. Here we have tried something. Here, for example, the reduction of the remittance cost of transactional cost of mobile money, and the state subsidy for some of the most vulnerable. But unfortunately, the stimulus tax incentive that President Kenyatta introduced in the height of the COVID was lifted last month, and to my mind, it was lifted too soon. But I cannot cry only about lifting the subsidy, the stimulus for business, which is the reduction of headline tax from 30% to 25%, and the VAT from 16 to 14%. But I have to say, subsidy, stimulus should also be given to those who do not have the privilege to have a taxable direct income. The most vulnerable do not have a tax you are reducing from 30 to 25%. They also, as citizens, could use a certain form of state subsidy. Perhaps reducing VAT on mass food products as a way of appreciating the challenges that people are facing. I think just to say, and you have a lot of passion in what you say. Let me start with that about the vaccine. I have been an Undersecretary General of the United Nations, and my job and experience has taught me that the most important authority on vaccines in the world is the World Health Organization. The World Health Organization position right now is that they are certified vaccines which, if not adulterated, are a genuine cure to COVID. We live in an information age where anybody can produce a video and post it with all manner of scenarios about side effects. Let me tell you, a COVID vaccine exists, and nobody's forcing you to take it. but I'm queuing to take it as soon as I can. You've said also passionately about agriculture. I can understand that. Uganda has come from nowhere and just run past Kenya in competitive agricultural production and agricultural exports. I know for a long time we have been dependent on maize from eastern Uganda because of their natural phosphate deposits, which means that they don't use as much fertilizer as we do. But now it just proliferated. You go to Kiminini, you buy pineapples from Uganda. You go everywhere here, you are eating chickens from Uganda. We are importing eggs from Uganda and everything. It's a challenge to a nation. A nation's vulnerability grows when it does not pay attention to feeding its people as much as it's capable of or can be capable of. And every time we add red tape to our production, every time we've varied levies between counties on agricultural produce, every time we have hidden costs of corruption, delayed utilization of research results, all those times we are declining in competitiveness. I mentioned to you that Kenya is in a place where for our national recovery we need a war-like situation. Mobilize the country that we must succeed. We must do it at all costs. And throw everything into making Made in Kenya competitive. Utilizing the idle capacity in academic, in research terms, in outreach terms, but also in physical resources of our people, which is now left idle. It is true that we bungled with irrigation because of greed, criminal greed, by those who are behind the different dams. And I wish many of them could go to jail. But it has not taken away from the importance of irrigation as a way of spreading out the potential of Kenyan agricultural production. When arable land that is rain-fed is increasingly coming under pressure from unsustainable inheritance laws and practices. But let me go back to the top other questions that were being asked. The idea of a resource center here. About 5 years ago, I had a discussion with the Vice Chancellor on the possibility of building a resource center come business multiplication center on the basis of research and innovation associated with this university. It's interesting that you come back to that. I don't want to make that a political campaign promise, but as a native of this part of the world, I'll be very, very happy to associate with efforts to build a world-class resource center at KIBABI University. I have been in discussion with some missions in Nairobi about that possibility, but I'll give progress to the Vice Chancellor as soon as I get the latest consultation. But something that has been ongoing that I discussed with the Vice Chancellor and I want to see go on, particularly now that I am back home. There was a nice question about the relationship between innovation and demand. Mitumba, the history of Mitumba killed the first regime of Kenyan textile manufacturing. The Kikomis, the River Texas, the Raymonds of this country were killed by Mitumba. And it was the children of the powerful and their affiliates who were basically importing clothes that would otherwise be shredded and selling them in Kenya at no tax or low tax. And they undercut the textile industry. The question of Mitumba in Kenya is very similar to the question of counterfeit spare parts in River Road. There are people who have livelihoods that are dependent on Mitumba. But Mitumba is a parasite industry. It's an industry that grows because low-cost textiles are not available in the local market. When I was minister, somebody called USTR, who is actually the American Minister of Trade, was trying to push that in AGOA we write their extension of duty-free export of Mitumba to Kenya, to Africa under AGOA. And I confronted this minister in a global meeting. I said, are you telling us that a condition for us to sell things to you is that you buy our clothes, you wear them, when you are finished with them, when you die, you export and sell them to us, that we are sentenced to wearing used clothes and you buy them when they are new from us. At the time, he said, no, let us not make this as a major matter. But 2 years after I stopped being minister, it was written into the agreement that we must not ban mitumba. A few years ago, the presidents of the East African community agreed on a minimal tax on mitumba. Immediately, America complained and threatened to kick them out of AGOA. Kenya, Tanzania, and Uganda quickly bid a retreat and left little Rwanda as the only country which was saying, we agreed, I'm not walking away on taxing mitumba. But speaking together with a collective voice, it is possible to banish the importation of mitumba and enhance the production of cheap quality textiles to replace the mitumba in our domestic market. It's even part of national pride that we cannot sell to our mothers and daughters the underpants of dead Americans, which happens under mitumba. There is no justification for mitumba if you want to grow domestic demand for your own manufactured textiles. On the question of citizens join in what we're doing, the person